Okay, so welcome to the first A&P1 lab video for the SUNY Orange A&P program. And we're going to go over first the anatomical directional terms. And I want to remind you that when you're applying these directional terms, you are applying them in the context of the anatomical position. Okay, so we're going to start with superior and inferior. So superior meaning closer to the head end of the organism. Inferior meaning closer to the tail end or pelvic end of the organism. And remember, superior and inferior we apply really on the main body axis, not in the limbs. Okay, the next set of terms are anterior and posterior. Anterior meaning closer to the front of the organism. I'll turn the model here so we have a little better perspective. Okay, so anterior would be closer to the front of the organism. The opposite, posterior, would be closer to the back of the organism. And remember that in humans, anterior means the same thing as ventral, belly side, and posterior means the same thing as dorsal, backside. Okay, another set of terms that we'll go over are medial and lateral. Medial, I'm going to turn back this way. Medial means closer to the midline of the body. Lateral means further from the midline, closer to the side. Okay, so this term you can use in the trunk, and same with anterior and posterior. You can use those in the trunk or in the limbs. Okay, so just to take the upper limb here, what little of it we have, you have an anterior surface of the upper limb, you have a medial surface of the upper limb, you have a lateral surface of the upper limb, and you have a posterior surface of the upper limb. Okay, so when we get to muscles later in the semester, we'll talk about anterior compartments, posterior compartments, medial muscles, lateral muscles. So you'll hear those terms come up again. Okay, we also have the terms superficial and deep. Okay, so superficial would mean closer to the body surface. Okay, deeper would be further from the body surface. Okay, the term external means the same as superficial. The term internal means the same as deep. Okay, and last but not least, we have the terms proximal and distal. Proximal meaning closer to a point of attachment. Distal meaning further away from a point of attachment. So you can imagine the elbow out here, that would be distal to the shoulder. Okay, the shoulder would be proximal when compared to the elbow. Okay, now we're also going to talk about some planes of section. Okay, and you'll see my hand come in and out of the frame. So if we had a plane of section that was cutting the body in this direction, dividing the body into superior and inferior pieces, this would be in the transverse plane. Okay, if we had a section dividing the body coming in this way, so it was dividing the body, I should change my perspective here. So we're coming in this way, and we're dividing the body into anterior and posterior pieces. That would be the frontal plane. Okay, and then we also could have a plane that would be dividing the body into left and right pieces, that would be the sagittal plane. If that particular sagittal plane divides the body into exact left and right halves, which I hope my arm is doing here, then that would be at the median or mid-sagittal plane. Okay, and remember, the median or mid-sagittal plane is a special type of sagittal section. Okay, so it would be parallel to all of the regular sagittal sections that you would have on either side. Okay. Now, because the organs have been removed from this specimen, we can see the body cavities very well here. Okay, so remember that we have two sets of body cavities. First, we have the dorsal body cavity. Okay, the dorsal body cavity is the location where we find the components of the central nervous system. Okay, so the superior part of the dorsal body cavity is the cranial cavity. You can see part of the cranial cavity in here, and the brain would be in the cranial cavity. The other portion of the dorsal body cavity is the vertebral cavity, would be inside the vertebrae here, and you can see part of where that cavity should be right in this section. Okay, so the dorsal body cavity divided into the cranial cavity and the vertebral cavity. Okay, now as we turn our model around again, we have a nice view of the ventral body cavity here. Okay, and the ventral body cavity can be divided into two subdivisions: the thoracic cavity and the abdominopelvic cavity. Okay, the thoracic cavity can be further subdivided into the superior mediastinum, which would be about right here. You can see that the trachea, the primary bronchi, superior vena cava, aorta are all in here. The esophagus is in here as well. Okay, and it passes through posterior to the heart. Okay, so the superior mediastinum right here, that's one subdivision. Then we would have the pericardial cavity here, also in a medial position. The pericardial cavity is the space that surrounds our friend the heart. And then we would have two pleural cavities, one on each side of the body. Each of these would house one of the lungs. Okay? As we go past the muscular diaphragm, we get to the abdominopelvic cavity, and the abdominopelvic cavity can be subdivided into its two main subdivisions: the abdominal cavity, which is here, okay, and all the digestive organs that were in there have been removed. We'll look at those again in the next segment. And this big depression here inside the hip bones, the space within the hip bones and the sacrum, this is the pelvic cavity. Okay, and you can see the urinary bladder is in here, and in females, the reproductive organs would all be in here as well.